Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of Financially Turbulent. We're super excited for this one because we finally have our first guest on this podcast. Welcome, Jaineel Patel.
Thank you, Harman.
So perfect. So in this case, Jaineel is a very good friend of ours. We've known him from university, and at this time he's in the consulting space. And I know a lot of people have been questioning, how do I get into consulting? What does the consulting field even entail, and what could a career in consulting look like, right? So he's here. He's been in the consulting space for about 4 years now, and he's here to answer all of your questions and even give us some insights, right? And
Absolutely.
We'll kind of get into our past a little bit too, on how you actually got into consulting itself, with the experiences we had in university at Brock, because he also went to Brock with us. So let's
Perfect.
get to it.
Yeah, Jaineel, why don't you just give us a brief overview of, how you got into consulting and what's something that kind of interested you in the field? Sure. So I think we know this. We went to university together. I was in the Bachelor's of Business Administration program with you guys. I did my first co-op term at a financial institution, and that's what kind of got me into the mindset that I wanted to work with stakeholders. So there's obviously a spectrum of jobs. You can work independently, you can have a role in a company, but work mostly by yourself. But I knew that I wanted to work with people.
Mm-hmm.
More than that, I was in a specifically operations related role at the bank. So I worked with numbers, I worked with technologies, I worked with data quite a bit. And that's what kind of framed what kind of stakeholder management I wanted to do. At the time, I thought that I wanted to become an investment banker, which is why I had tried extremely hard to get into a bank as my first internship, and I stayed there eventually for 3 more terms. But I'd say that consulting kind of called to me, because as soon as I realized that I liked working with people, I liked working in data, it was a natural progression to kind of get into analysis, so critical thinking and that kind of stuff. I'd also say that one other thing that made a huge difference was I had the correct mentorship at the bank. So my manager there was a previous management consultant, and he had reached out to me, and he's like, I know you're doing your internships here, but I think that the skill set that you have, the aptitude that you have, might be really good for management consulting. And that's kind of what got me onto the track of even looking into consulting, because as we know, to everyone at Brock, it was there's either the 4 accounting firms, or there were the 5 banks.
Yeah.
I had to start
the RBC. Everyone was there initially.
Exactly.
It was either you were at the big 4 firms, or you're going to RBC for most of your internships. Right? They were a bigger. They're a big employer sponsor over there.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us, if you guys didn't know, all of us started pretty much in the finance field in BBA, and Cover ended up being the only one that stuck throughout it.
Yeah.
Jaineel started in it, I started in it. Both of us ended up switching in ITIS at the end of our 4th year. Sorry, near the beginning of our 4th year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had all of our courses together at that point.
Yeah.
It was weird. Harman was my roommate, and I'd also see him in class.
So that was pretty much the only semester where we actually had any classes together, right?
Yeah.
And then it ended up being all of our courses
Everything
together at the same time.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty difficult switch, but I think it was better for both of us, because we finally realized that we like numbers, we like the finance side, but turning it into a career, we wanted to do it in different ways, right? So what would you say were some of the challenges you kind of experienced after you came into, let's say, the ITS field and then getting into consulting?
So I think it's a bit of a twofold, because as you know, management information systems are major. Tech now has essentially taken over everything.
Yeah.
And back 5, 6 years ago, when we were getting into the major, there was a huge echo chamber that it was either finance or accounting, because those at that time were the coveted careers. Mm-hmm. What kind of made it, I actually think of IT as an advantage, because there's a huge pool of individuals that have finance expertise, that have accounting expertise. Tech is a bit new. So, you don't have, it's one of those careers where if you have any experience, you're actually within the top 10 percentile, because something like data analytics quite literally did not exist in the form that it does now 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's unrealistic for any employer to say, we need 15 years of experience in this, or we need 20 years of experience in this. So I'd say it was an advantage from that standpoint. I think one of the things that was a challenge was, and I don't know how much you guys have covered this on the podcast, but Brock University, it's a great school, and I have all the respect for it. I'm very proud that I went there. It is a mid-sized university.
Yeah.
It is not a University of Toronto. It is not a Western University. It is not Queen's. It's not a McGill. So naturally, the pool of how many firms actually have campus presentation or have any representation at Brock was lower, which meant that if it was getting my internships at the bank, if it was getting any postgraduate roles after I graduated, it was a lot of independent networking. So a lot of it had to do with kind of going on LinkedIn and finding people myself, reaching out to recruiters, reaching out to consultants. I'd say that was one of the bigger challenges. Like yourself, I also graduated right at the start of COVID, which is when the market fell off a cliff. So that was a challenge. But I'd say overall, I think what we went through during our undergraduate was a good preparation for the work that was to come. One of the biggest kind of feedback points that I see at work is that, I had never done anything like this before coming into like the workforce and consulting. Whereas for me, I felt like we did internships, we had case-based classes. We also in MIS specifically, we had an analytics component to everything we did. Everything came down to technology, everything came down to kind of the insights you could provide from the data that was available. So that gave me a leg up. I also think that going into a university like Brock, it heightens the ambition in you, because you realize that the deck is somewhat stacked against you, and that the majority of the work will be done by you. It's not so much that you'll attract a career, it's that you'll have to chase a career.
You don't really get to piggyback off of the name of the university, like let's say a Laurier, Waterloo, Queen's, McGill, right?
Exactly.
For Brock, you really do have to set yourself apart, and especially for the ITS side, I think the program at Brock especially kind of was a good mix for what you at least needed for consulting as well, right? Because oftentimes you're the bridge between the client and the individuals, the technical side that's pretty much doing the work to accomplish the needs for the client. And that's pretty much what we ended up learning at Brock too, through the ITS courses, through the management courses. So that was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and I feel like going to a smaller school, it really goes to show you like the community around you as well, right? You get to know your professors a little better, and obviously you do have those tools to use to leverage off of, as you do at every single school. Yeah. In my opinion, going to a smaller school, I feel like it was a little better in the sense that you can use those skills and set yourself apart from the 20, 30 people that are going to be applying for your school. If you're just the top two, for example. Yeah. I feel like that might ring a bell for the employers. Like, okay, this guy really stood out, let me give it a shot and see what he has to offer, what she has to offer.
Yeah, I actually, to that point, there was a recruiter at the bank that I had, spoken to a few times. And he said something that was interesting, and not to generalize, I'm not, by no means am I saying that, going to a small university is the only thing, but his point of view on it was, if I could skip the Ivy, skip the Schulich, and go straight to not even Brock, but to Humber College, I would do that, because there's a sense of having a bit of a chip on your shoulder when you're from a smaller school. It's what encourages you to work harder at it. It gives you the appreciation of having the opportunity to work at a Fortune 500 institution at the age of 21. I think that when you go to a bigger school, the norm is that you go and you become a business analyst at RBC, and the height of it is that you go and become an investment banker at RBC, or you go and work at a private equity firm. I think that getting out of that mindset of this is the norm, and understanding that this is kind of the baseline that you build off of is extremely important. So
because at bigger schools, especially what you would consider a full-on achievement coming from a smaller school is just a baseline of you just getting into the industry, right? Depending on the person, that can be really motivating, or it could be something that really brings a person down.
Yeah, but personally, I'm not too fond of the tech sector as much as you guys. But from what I've been hearing, is the tech sector is shifting a lot towards what do you bring to the table rather than what school you went to. Because at the end of the day, education kind of stands still at one point. Once you left the school, you're not really learning anything, right? It's just the skills you're developing from certain projects you've done, certain co-op terms you've done, and things like that. That kind of go to show these employers, like you're really going to be better than someone that went to like an Ivy League school. For example.
Yeah. So in my current team, I we'll get to this as well, but I work in a capacity as a hybrid between a management consultant and an analytics consultant.
So before we actually get into that, why don't we kind of clarify the terms? What is consulting and what type of consultant are you, right?
Sure.
And the different types of consulting that could be present within the industry itself.
Sure. So consulting at a very high level, and it doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. It's anyone that advises any sort of company. It could even be internal. So if you're advising different departments within a company, you are a consultant. By nature, by the root of the word, you're consulting on a specific skill set. Now, I know that over the past little bit, that definition has morphed and it's skewed very heavily towards management consulting specifically. So business consulting and more specifically being at a firm and consulting other clients. When I was at the bank, I saw there was an entire team that was specifically dedicated to helping internally the bank solve its issues. So, increasing revenue growth avenues, increasing, efficiencies to cut costs, increasing profit by any means necessary. So you don't always have to just consult multiple companies at once. It's very possible that it happens internal. The type of consulting that I do specifically, as I mentioned, I'm a hybrid between a management consultant. So I do, I leverage the business skill sets that we learned in our bachelor's. I also skew towards analytics. So I leverage a lot of the skill sets we learned in our MIS degree. And essentially my job, very boiled down, is to help companies make better use of their data. So if you think about it, and not that I've worked with a client like this, but if you really think about it, like a convenience store, they might not think that they have data, but they have a POS system, right? All of that is data because by nature it's tagged to a time that a transaction took place, the kind of product that a person bought, what the price of it was. It also, it could give you an idea of what your seasonality or when your best times of the day are. So my job is to essentially take that data, clean it up, and visualize it so that they can visually look at what the difference is. It's one thing to give someone an Excel spreadsheet which says, here's your profitability and this is when you're most profitable. It's better when you're able to take that data, turn it into a little bit of a dashboard so that they're visually able to see, actually, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., this is what my revenue looks like. Yeah. So I'm actually doing better after lunch, or I'm doing better before dinner. These are the kind of things that we'd like to, uncover from whatever data that they have.
Okay, so it's like wearing multiple hats at the end of the day. You're not just doing one side of the story, you're looking at multiple different things to help, a business or a client do better.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. I think you kind of covered the basics of consulting, and you only really scratched the surface here. Yeah. There's a lot more to it. Obviously, with time in mind, we have to make sure, So let's move forward to the next question. See, how has your career path been with your current employer? Like, in terms of promotions, career growth, skills you've developed, or newer projects you've taken on, and like, what did you like, for example, or what did you dislike?
Yeah. So my current employer is great. I've been with them for the past. It'll be 2 years in April, so it's just a year and 3/4-ish. In that time, I was promoted. I was promoted at the beginning of this year. I switched from being a consultant to a senior consultant. So going from on a project executing only kind of working on the task items that are assigned to figuring out what those task items are, I'd say a degree closer to the client. So it's not so much that, I'm only in these status update meetings, like with my mic off and my camera on. It's more like I'm actually actively giving the updates. I'm, helping the client kind of get to the end point that they're looking to reach to. I'd say that consulting as a whole, and this is firm agnostic, so it could be, you could be at the Big Four, the MBBs, a mid-tier firm. Consulting is a challenging field because by nature, your job is to do anything that can help, or at least my job is to do anything that can help a company reach profitability or reach greater profitability. Now, that's not always black and white. One company might need, a strategic plan over the next 5 years on how many revenue streams they can capture. For one company, it could be that they have great revenue. It's just that their costs are extremely high, and that's why they're not profitable. In that sense, you would be looking at what are the efficiencies you could achieve. Can the work that's being done be done in a lesser time, using less resources to, eventually get a path towards getting to like a net zero and then being profitable? I'd say that one of the other bigger challenges is that the role is hyper client focused. So it's not like, when you work when I worked at the bank, the filter between you and your stakeholder is always your manager.
Yeah.
There's always someone in between to kind of like guide you and kind of make sure that if you've done something wrong, that like they can help you fix it up and then get it to the next level. In consulting, not to say that there isn't guidance and advice given, it's just that you are ultimately responsible for your work items.
And you are the face of all
Exactly.
the work, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of interesting because if you do it's a double-edged sword. If you go through a project with a client, and this is a large client, and you do a great job, the chances that they'll remember you if you ever apply to a job at their company is high, because you don't, when you're working in consulting, decisions from a company's perspective to hire consultants is done at the top level. So this is something that a VP or an SVP kind of mandates, and they say, oh, we have this much work and we need to get a firm to help us out with this. So your touch points are with executives.
Yeah.
And if you do a good job, that's a really good exposure, because you just got to work with, I've worked with private equity firms, asset managers, real estate developers, construction firms. If, in a role like that, if you do well, you have a very wide network, because everyone just saw you do a great job.
Yeah.
Now, if you find it challenging and you didn't put in your best foot forward, then a group of individuals that are key decision makers at these companies just saw that.
Yeah.
And so it's extremely important, and one of the bigger challenges is that you always have to show up.
That's why a lot of people say, right, a year in consulting is like 5 at another job, right?
Yeah.
Because the amount of work you're getting, it's all ambiguous.
Exactly.
You're figuring out, okay, well, what could be a potential solution for the company, because they don't know themselves, right? That's why they're coming to you for help. And that really puts you in diverse problems that, of course, you have to figure out.
Yeah.
And that's basically what all of these other companies end up liking about you if you end up applying to them.
Yeah. It's also kind of interesting because you have to, despite that, you have to remember that no single person is Superman. Like, no one is always on the ball, always doing the best of their efforts. You always try your hardest, but it's not that you'll always get something right on the first try. And so it's important to not lose kind of the motivation and the confidence to keep at it, because largely, and this could be different, but in my experience, largely, no one is expecting you to get something right on the first time. There's always feedback, because the most straightforward things that I've done, so just getting a spreadsheet that needs to be visualized and sent off, even in that, the client will always come back and say, oh, we actually want this color changed, and we want to change this visually and move this to here and split this up, whatever it is. I will very unlikely get it on the first try. So whatever anxiety you have regarding I can't mess this up, you can have some sort of alleviation to that, because you're always going to have to make changes. A client will always have expectation, and not a client. I think human psychology is that even if you look at something, you're compelled to give some sort of improvement to it, just so it's not like you didn't try to at least get it to the best point possible.
It makes sense. So, there's a lot of, there's been a trend in the last 2 years, right? On TikTok or Instagram, there's always these day in the life videos, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes I come across these consultants, they're always traveling.
Yeah.
That's one of the things with consulting. And you see them going around the world, sometimes around the US, around Canada, around Europe. And half the time you just see they're not really doing any work. Is that true for you? Or what does your day look like?
It's funny you say that because yes, I have seen those, and I feel like those videos, apart from your question, I feel like those videos are specifically made to look aesthetic.
Yeah.
And being at your laptop at 10 p.m. is not aesthetic. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the part of the job that people hide. But no, I think my experience has not been like that at all. I think from a traveler perspective, I got into consulting post COVID, so the world in that sense has shifted quite a bit. So clients no longer feel the need to have you at their offices 5 days or 4 days a week and then fly out and fly back, because largely people realize work can be done virtually if you have the right safeguards in place, if you have kind of the right project plan in place. So I don't do a lot of traveling that's international or even intercontinental, but I do travel to client site quite a bit. So if I'm making a large presentation to their directors, I will be doing that in person, kind of in their boardrooms, like, presenting this. If we're going to do just like a walkthrough of the business, because from an operations perspective, if you're working with a manufacturer, let's take banks, private equity firms, other kinds of like real estate developers out of it, the less professional and the more kind of like roll up your sleeve and get into like the work industries, you don't learn that on the computer. You learn that by going into these places and seeing how they're actually operating. Now that could quite literally be going into their warehouse and seeing what their setup of machines is. Are there certain machines that just aren't being used? Like, these are the kinds of observations that you want to make, and so those things have to be done in person. And so I'd say my travel is about 25 to 30% in a week. So I'm in a hybrid model, so I'm in the office twice a week, and I'd say that of those 2 days, at least one of them will be spent in some form at the clients.
Okay. In terms of hours, like, are you working? I know a lot of times when you're looking at like jobs that are more demanding, you're looking at 10, 12 hours a day or 50 hours a week. What has it been like for you? And what's a busy week for you, for example?
So again, my firm is great. We have like, our culture is that if there's no work, you should not be online past 5. By that virtue, if you have work, it is the expectation that you get it done. So I'd say in an average week, I'm somewhere between 40 and 50 hours.
Okay.
And that's, when I'm on one project or max 2 projects, and I'm like, my time is balanced between them. Now there are times where, everyone else is on a project and like you just need to take on 2 or 3 at once. And like at that time it gets a little bit like ambiguous in the timelines, because that can really spill into your day. So one of the challenges I think a lot of people find with consulting is that you have all these meetings to determine your to-dos, but very little time to actually do the to-dos. Because if you think about it, you need to first interface with the client to figure out what the game plan is for the next sprint. You then kind of connect internally to say, okay, well, these are their expectations. How are we going to work towards that? And if you're on, let's say, 2 clients and you're doing that twice a day, that leaves gaps to do your work. But if you have a lot of meetings, like naturally the work is done in the evening. I have, on every engagement that I've been on, I've had a great team. And so the senior managers, the managers on my team, they plan the project so well, and they leave enough buffer time that if there is spillage, it's not like I have to work until 12 a.m. or anything like that. Like max, I'd be going until I also think that consulting is a career where you can find a balance. So there are times where I start at 9 a.m. and the work just requires me to go until 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. There are other times where if it's not quite as pressing, if I'm not presenting something the next day, I can work from 9 to 5, take a break at 5, go see some friends, go see my girlfriend, come back and just continue, have dinner and then finish up my work in the last couple hours of the day before I go to sleep. That is possible. And I find that that helps with the demanding schedule of being a consultant.
Yeah, I feel like now a lot of times, when someone's looking for a job, the first thing they look for is, does it offer me that work-life balance? And is it a hybrid position?
Yeah.
I feel like post-COVID, a lot of people, 90% of people aren't looking to go back into work 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Is that something that you have? Are you working hybrid from home sometimes, or is it every single day you're going to the office, or if not the office, you're going to your clients?
So I I would say I'm in the office 2 times a week.
Okay.
And then outside of that, I will go to the client site where required. So if like, I think a couple of weeks ago, I had actually called you on my way back, but I went to King City, Ontario, and like that was something I needed to like, leave at basically like 7 a.m. so I could be there for 9 a.m. kind of thing. But if I do something like that, like my firm is okay that like I could skip one of the office days because I went to the client site. I met my like hybrid requirements. Naturally, you will sometimes have like there have been times where I was in the office 4 days a week, and only one of them I was at the office, and 3 of them I was with the client to kind of do walkthroughs or do status update meetings. So yeah, I'd say on average it's between 2 and 3 days a week.
So when you're managing, let's say, multiple clients and multiple projects, what do you do to pretty much keep yourself organized to make sure that, hey, I have deliverables for each of these clients at these set deadlines? What's your process of getting that work done?
So this is interesting because I feel like this is one of those things school really does not prepare you for, because in school your deadlines are when your assignments are due, or like at the max like when you have a midterm.
Yeah.
And usually those things are spaced out a couple weeks. At work, it's like, like if you have 3 clients, like you could have something that's due Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which means Monday and Tuesday you really have to grind to like plan it out. I'd say one of the things that has really helped me is managing an active calendar. So I jot down in my notebook when everything is due and what my to-do is. So once I'm done my meetings, I'll have a list of, let's say, 4 to 5 items tagged with a date. So I know mentally like when I'm actually expected to be accountable to these work items. And then I start planning kind of my capacity around the meetings that I have. So if it's a meeting that I don't have to, like, for example, like a morning sprint with my team internally, if I have a lot of work and I just need that time back, like that half an hour, like I could say, hey guys, I'm gonna skip today's because I have these work items and I can do that. Largely anything that I can do to shift the time around to just give throughout the day, like if I can have a split of, let's say, 2 to 3 hours of meetings, 4 to 5 hours of execution, I think that's a good healthy balance, because for any deliverable, the amount of time you spend planning, you're going to spend a lot more than that in actually executing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, managing an active calendar really helps me. Like I said, no one is Superman. Like you need to be able to rely on your team and kind of go to them and say, oh, like this is not something I can handle right now. Can you please help me out? And the harder part about that is not so much that like people don't trust their teammates. I feel like naturally humans have this ownership of like their work items, and it feels weird to be like, oh, like I want to let go of one of my work items because it feels like you're kind of giving your work away. But that's not how it is, because in order to serve all your clients effectively, the team needs to work together.
Yeah.
So
there has to be that synergy, and you really need some proper trust and faith in your team members as well.
Yeah. No, exactly. So I'd say, managing an active calendar and trusting that my team is right there with me and I'm right there with them is big.
So do you use something like time blocking? I know it's very popular these days, especially with things like deep work. I use it for my real estate business.
Yeah.
So is that something you utilize, or do you have your own system that you've come up with over the years?
So I do block my time, but I can only block it mentally, because at the end of the day, like if one of like the partners or a manager or a client is like, oh, like I'd like to speak with you between like 2 and 3 p.m. Like I need to free that time up. Like my time block, it doesn't hold against that. But yeah, I do. So I try to find pockets of the day. Usually for me, it's usually between the hours of like 12 and 6.
Okay.
Because in the morning I like to get all of my to-dos, and then I like to do my to-dos in the afternoon.
So I guess it's kind of more like a balance between keeping your schedule open but making mental notes of like, hey, I gotta really do this, but then if something comes up, you gotta be versatile and shift your focus.
Exactly.
Meetings. Okay.
Exactly.
That's pretty similar to a lot of these industries where in a corporate world where you gotta really juggle things around.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's say in terms of getting into an industry like this, right? For someone like yourself, you mentioned that you really had to go out of your way to network with a lot of people because Brock didn't really provide those types of opportunities. At least the employers that you would have liked to work with didn't really come to Brock to recruit, right? So let's say another individual at a smaller school or even a bigger school is looking to get into consulting. What are some key actionable steps they could consider taking in order to set themselves up for success?
Sure. So let's look at it from the lens of a smaller school, because a bigger school has at least, like, if they follow this plan, they'll definitely like shoot somewhere between there. But from a smaller school, it's a little bit more challenging. It's a little bit more nuanced. If you know at the age of 18 that this is what you want to do, which, by the way, it's...
Most people don't.
No, you don't. Because consulting is not being a lawyer. It's not being a doctor. Like, it's not one of those careers that in society, it's like, wow, like that person is a consultant. It's just not what it is. But let's say you find out, like me, in your third year that you want to be a consultant, and you're at a mid-sized school, somewhere where they're, like, on-campus recruitment isn't quite as active. I'd say that in today's digital world, it's become easier than ever because you can meet virtually anyone through LinkedIn. I have funny story. I have Zaza Pachulia from the Golden State Warriors. He's retired now, but I have him on LinkedIn, and that's just because like it's so like LinkedIn is not Facebook, it's not Instagram. Like if you reach out to connect with someone on LinkedIn, like the pool of people reaching out to them on there is far smaller.
So before we actually move on, do you have a specific type of message you like to use? A lot of people try to provide some kind of value to the people that they're reaching out right before they make their ask. Do you have anything like that maybe that you'd be open to share?
So it's quite long, so I can't like share here, but if
general guideline, let's say.
Yeah, sure. Hi, insert name. My name is Jaineel Patel. I recently graduated from a bachelor's in business administration degree from X University. I have 16 months of experience in financial services, working in strategic management and operational due diligence, like whatever it is. And I saw that you're currently working in X field at X firm. Would you have some time to connect? I'd love to really learn more about your career path. Something like that. Like, and it's funny because when we were at Brock, like, I don't know if you recall, but I had a spreadsheet that was literally a list of 70 names. It was 70 at that time. By the time I got into consulting, it was about 170. That like I would have their name, their company, and then a formula which literally just spat out like with the messages with all the information filled in. I would just copy paste that into LinkedIn, and like I do 10 of those a day.
I feel like that's kind of the common concern with LinkedIn, right? A lot of times these newbies that are just entering the field, they just feel like, okay, you know what? I can upload a selfie as my profile
No.
picture. I can just have a standard bio and then just send a request to someone. That doesn't work from what I've seen, especially. You know, having a professional picture, having a strong bio, and actually updating your LinkedIn as you move around in your career. And whenever you're sending a LinkedIn request, adding a message to really show the person why, you want their time to even review your LinkedIn request really sets you apart.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really missed nowadays with people entering.
I mean, it's getting recommended a lot, right? Like we've been hearing about LinkedIn as far as like 2015, 2016, pretty much 100%. When we started universities, right? So, but I've always been the one that never really put any focus on it. Any of the employment that I ended up getting was through external factors rather than LinkedIn itself. But I know you're someone who's had a lot of success, right? And I observe your profile from time to time, whenever 1 or 2 months I decide to log into LinkedIn. I've been trying to be a little bit more proactive on that. So what would you say are some of the key things someone that's just getting into LinkedIn should keep in mind? Let's say some type of basic etiquette, like you said, not having a professional profile picture, right? And having a bio. What would you say some of your recommendations are for that?
So photo and bio are two of the most important things, because when you're not connected with someone, those are the two things they see when you like send them like an invitation. I'd say being up to date with all of your experience on there is important, and I want to be clear. Not like if you're a third year student and you have no experience, that's fine. Like I was also there like before I got my internships. Like I was in clubs. I was in the Brock Finance and Investment Group. Like I had that on LinkedIn. I was in an executive position at the Data Analytics Student Association. I was VP of Finance. I had that on there. Like these things, that's what you hold on to when you don't have experience, and that's fine. I don't think anyone is expecting you to kind of, have all the experience when you're 19 years old. That's just not realistic. To the other point, I think the thing that worked well for me is that I started to network when I did have a little bit more experience, but I don't think it would have deviated quite a bit if it was like square one.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. There's, you said the thing about providing value to like someone when you're reaching out to them. I found, because I'm now in the stage of my career where people are reaching out to me, I found that people reaching out is actually the value in and of itself, because people love to talk about themselves. And like, that's not a secret. Like, I think everyone wants to share like the story that they've like been kind of walking through for the past like 6-7 years.
Like we are now.
Exactly, yeah. And so like when someone reaches out, making sure that you're professional and it's not just like, hey Harman, do you have time to chat? Anytime works for me. Like, as long as it's not that and it's structured and you've thought it out, people want to give you the opportunity to like, at least get exposure. Because as we mentioned, I went to Brock, but a lot of the consultants that I networked with before I got into consulting did not. These were people, I met someone who so they were a manager at Deloitte, and they decided to do their MBA at Wharton, so in America. And they, like, when I messaged them, they reached out to me within 30 minutes and they're like, hey, like, absolutely, let's schedule some time like early next week. And that person went to a literal Ivy League school in the States. There's nothing at that time that I could have provided that person, right? But they wanted to like help me out because A, like they're a good person, and B, like I'm sure on some level they want to kind of pass forward what it is that they got out of their career. Funny story about LinkedIn. So my current partner, so I don't know how much you guys know about like the structure of like hierarchy in consulting, but you most likely will start as like a consultant or business analyst. Like, different firms have different names, and you move up the ranks: senior manager, director, and partner. They're essentially the individuals that manage the engagement. And that doesn't mean like they'll manage the to-dos necessarily, but they're responsible for actually selling these engagements, like going into the market and say, oh, my team does this, like, is this something you'd be interested in? I reached out to my partner in 2021 of May, using the same message that I was telling you about, the same one that I had since 4th year of university. And he was like, yeah, like, let's hop on a call. And like, my first conversation, it was great. Like, I told him about what I did. He told me about what he did. He had recently joined the firm I'm at now, from Deloitte, and he was a director at the time, not a partner. And he's like, yeah, man, like, you seem like you have a good head on your shoulders. Like, you have great experience. Like, I hope the best for you. Right now, I'm not in a position where my team is expanding, so there's nothing. And like, I didn't reach out with the expectation, and that's actually extremely important. You don't always reach out with the expectation of getting a job, because you will not. I just reached out because I saw that this person switched. I was genuinely curious what the motivation for switching from, a big four firm to a mid-sized firm is. And so that was kind of my like hook for what I wanted to learn. And so we got off the call. He's like, yeah, I don't have anything for you right now, but like, let's keep in touch. Exactly, I'd say a year later, he posted on LinkedIn. He's like, I'm hiring for a consultant role within my team. Please reach out if you're interested. And I reached out to him, and like, it was like I had spoken to him yesterday. Like, he remembered my name. He's like, oh, like, yeah, like, let's hop on a call. Like, are you free at 12 p.m.? 12 p.m. And I sent this message at like 10:30 a.m. So like, within an hour and a half, he's like, oh yeah, like, let's hop on a call. And that eventually led to a job opportunity, and I'm now a consultant under him at my firm. That level of like, maintaining those relationships in the long term is important, because people aren't always going to have an opportunity to give you, but they will always have their time to give you. And if they give you that, you be very appreciative and very grateful of it. You make sure that you're staying in touch. When my partner got promoted to partner, I had messaged him to say, hey, congratulations on your promotion. Like, he said thank you. Like, that's a very small one, but it's a touch point. You're in their, like, just in their viewpoint. If I had waited a year and waited for this person to be like, hey, like, I have a job opening, like, and I reached out, like, how many people are reaching out, right?
Exactly. I was going to say that. That's something that happens very commonly with me as well. I'll get people that are looking to work at the bank I'm currently working for. They're like, hey, I saw a role that's within your department or within your bank. Would you have time for a call?
Yeah.
And it's sure, like I'll make time for a call. But at the end of the day, it's like, had you just taken the steps before, built a relationship, you wouldn't be scrambling now to reach out to not just myself, because I know chances are they're reaching out to me, they're probably reaching out to 3, 4, 5 other people working for my bank.
Yeah.
So it's just building those relationships beforehand, and they'd be like, hey, as you recall, we chatted.
Yeah.
There's a role in your company that I like. Would you be open to, just putting in a good word for me, for example? Or if you know the hiring manager, do you mind connecting with me?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, connections will take you further.
Mhm.
If you spent the time to nurture them and and build a relationship, it'll take you longer and further, rather than reaching out to someone last minute.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you say that, because that's exactly how it is. Like, if you, when you're networking, are not just reaching out to one person, someone networking with you is not just reaching out to you.
Yes.
They're reaching out to everyone. Everyone on your team, anyone possible that would give them a chance to just say their piece. Actually, Harman, going back to your question, like about what I think someone should do if they're looking to get into consulting, I think LinkedIn is important. I think the other part of it, and this is the part that's like specifically applicable to me, it's essentially understanding that, yes, like the majority of consultants get into consulting out of school. That's just how it is, because most of the time these firms will go to the campus and they're making offers to a fourth year before they've even graduated, right? But I did not get my role in consulting like that. I graduated and I did not have a job for 5 months. And then I started working at an analytics startup. And at first I was just part-time. They then liked me and they're like, oh, we'd like to offer you a full-time position. After that, I went to a venture capital firm, which is when I actually got more experience working with clients, like face-to-face. And actually having the interfaces and planning projects and stuff like that. And after that is when I got my role in consulting. So there's two paths. You can get in through on-campus recruiting, which from a smaller school is actually, I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not even going to say it's unlikely, but it's less likely than, building your experience. Because as I said, consulting is not it's not just management consulting at a big firm. Consulting at its core is advising on something that you have an expertise in. You can, building expertise takes time. It took me time to understand analytics best practices. It took me time to understand, why is a dashboard in and of itself is not valuable. Those are graphs on a screen. What you can do with that and how you kind of think about the numbers there, that takes time to develop. Now, if you're fortunate enough to be at a school where firms look at your kind of the degree you're going to get and say, this person doesn't have experience, but we can get them in at an analyst level and really build them up and give them that experience. That is the most ideal case. Go for that, right? But if you're at a small school and you don't get in after your fourth year, I would really implore individuals to not lose hope. It's not like your only shot at it is gone. I had to work at it for a year and a half, even after graduating, before I got my shot. And that only happened because I knew from 5 years before I got it that I wanted to be a consultant. And every move I made, I worked backwards from that role. So if I was going to a venture capital firm, it wasn't, obviously that's very different than analytics, but I knew that would be a tool in my toolkit because I would get to work closer with clients. So playing the long game in networking, in your search to your ideal career is important. And not taking it too seriously. I think people get very nervous about I have to reach out to people on LinkedIn, I have to message someone. It's not as serious as that. If you just take some time, think about it, and you say, how would I want to be reached out to? Do I want to be reached out to at 4 p.m. on a workday? Probably not. If you just logically, if you're reaching out at 6, 7, people are usually home. They have more time. They're in the right mindset. It's just think it through. It's destined to happen if that's what you want to do.
Makes sense. So in this space, how would you say, what role does coaching or mentorship play in consulting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has it had any benefit for you? Do you have a mentor yourself? Or if not, would you like one?
Are you offering?
Well, I'm not in the consulting space, right? If anything, you would be my mentor for this.
Definitely not, but I appreciate the word. So mentorship is extremely important. I do have a mentor. It was actually, I have quite a few mentors over like a career that I started in 2018, so like just over 6 years now. I'd say one of the most influential ones was my second manager at the bank when I was doing my internship, because as I mentioned, he was a former consultant. And he's the first person that kind of like really put it into perspective, and he's like, you can do this. Like up until then I was lost in that like the hopelessness of like, oh, I go to Brock, like no firm recruits from here, like there's been one consultant in the past 50 years, because that was literally a statistic. Like I looked on LinkedIn to see like, oh, like who's at these firms, and there was one person that I had known at actually Accenture.
Wow.
That was from Brock. Yeah, I know, right? And like he was a great mentor. Like the person at Accenture, like I spoke to him, and like obviously he was early in his career, so he wasn't able to do much for me. But my manager would like, he literally pulled me aside at a point, and he's like, before you end your term, I want to tell you this. Like, I know you carry this like chip on your shoulder that you went to a small school and like you need to prove yourself. But he's like, he went to Ivy, like he did his MBA there, and he's like, you've proven yourself. Like you've done everything that a person from a big school would do. You have the experience. You now need to believe in yourself and do the things that actually get you closer to becoming a consultant. Like up until then, I was scared to do reach outs on LinkedIn because I was like, who's going to spend the time to talk to someone that's A, not from their school, or B, not from any big school? Who's going to spend the time and effort to kind of like mentor someone that has no relatability to them? Like these people are well achieved. And he said it in plain words. He's like you've done everything you need to. Now it's time to actually go chase what you want to chase. Because like he could tell, he's like, I don't think you want to work at the bank in the short term. Like I think, and I told him to, I was like, this is like, I would love to come back, but I don't want to come back as an analyst, because to go from analyst to VP is like a 20, 30-year career. I would rather, like my preferred approach, and I'm still testing this hypothesis, right? Like my preferred approach was that I wanted to go consult companies, make a network that would help me hopefully, expedite that timeline and come in not as an analyst, but maybe as a manager, maybe as a senior manager. So yes, mentorship is extremely important. I like to say that it only takes one. It really only takes one person to believe in you and like really like put it into perspective for like what you need to do next, or like even give you the confidence that people will take you seriously. Because that was my biggest thing. It's like, no one's going to take me seriously. And he's like, no, like, why would someone not take you seriously? Like, you've spent your time at a bank, like you have experience, like it's not like you're not providing value in your career. You've shaped yourself to do this. Now it's time that you let go of like this like inferiority you have of like your educational background and just like ask for your seat at the table. And I think that's a big part of it.
It makes sense. A lot to process. Definitely.
I mean, yeah, this has given me a lot of information to consulting personally. Like, I come from a background, you probably know, like, we've known each other. You know my background.
Yeah.
It's mainly been within the financial sector. So this, to me, itself was like a whole learning experience on its own. I know you kind of have that knowledge where you guys had a similar education. But even Harman, I feel like, for you, it's
even for me, because this is, I know we talk a lot, but this is one of the first times I've actually had an opportunity to dive deep a little bit into your profession, right? So based on this, what would you say are some strategies for growth that younger individuals can take that are perhaps already in the consulting field? Or what are some things you're doing to grow within your own field at this time as well?
I think there's two things. So taking initiative, because everyone likes the guy or the girl that puts their hand up. Like one of my most successful engagements at my firm wouldn't have happened if I didn't say, oh, like I'm already on a project, but I'll take the time out of my day to do both. And that went extremely well. That project eventually was what made a strong case for me to get promoted. So it's important to take initiative and to make sure that, if something is interesting to you, let people know. Like, no one's gonna know that you want to do something unless you tell them. And no one's going to be like, I feel like when I first started, like my concern was like, oh, like if I say I want to do something outside of what I've been given to do, it might look like I don't want to do but like if your approach is correct, like I didn't say, oh, like I want to abandon my current project. I said I will take the time out of my day because I recognize that it'd be a good opportunity, and it worked out. Like the project went great. I got good reviews on there, and like my partner saw that I took the opportunity to step up and like do a good job at it. Equally, like I also want to, be very transparent. Like it's important to compartmentalize. And by compartmentalize, I mean, you had asked about work-life balance earlier, right? Like sometimes the job doesn't give you work-life balance, but you have to, work your life around.
That's very true.
Yeah. Like I said, like, if I know that I have the 12-hour or 10-hour, 11-hour day ahead of me, that can either be me sitting down at my desk from 9 a.m. until 7, 8 p.m., or it can be me going from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then spending some time for myself to go see friends, to come see you wherever you are, like go see my girlfriend, whatever that is. Like I can take that time and come back and then spend my evening because I'm already feeling recharged to come back to work and just finish off what it is. I feel like sometimes and it's not a bad thing. It's actually more common amongst high performing individuals that you feel this overwhelming burden or like this overwhelming responsibility to finish everything on your plate at that time the earliest you can. But you can do that, and you can do that for a long time. It's just to gain long-term sustainability in any high pressure career, be that financial services, be that, real estate, like entrepreneurship, like you need to set those boundaries and like really work your time around it. And the biggest thing is that people don't, because you don't prioritize your own like life as much as you prioritize work items. Because if someone said to you like, oh, like if you had a 10-hour day in front of you and someone was like, oh, like there's actually a client meeting you need to take between 5 and 7, you're going to do everything to balance and like make that work. If possible, you should give that same priority to your own life and be like, oh, like between 5 and 7, I have to go do me, and I have to go relax for a bit, and I'm happy to come back and work at it. Because you can only do so many 10-hour straight days, but you can definitely build more sustainability if you're giving yourself some time throughout the day to just unplug and then plug back.
I feel like that's a really good point you covered, because a lot of jobs nowadays, it's like the requirement, especially for some jobs where you're working from home, or if you have a hybrid model, it's like they just assume the days you're working from home, you can put in an extra 2 hours because you're not traveling to work in the morning or at night, right? So I feel like creating that balance or setting those boundaries where you just plug out, go do your daily life tasks and come back to work. It gives you that opportunity of being a little more refreshed and avoiding burnout. Because I've realized, especially now and in our time and generation,
with
a lot
the remote
of people
work,
are going
especially
through burnout, and then they're facing mental health issues where they're not having a personal life, even like financially. Okay, apart from work, what is it that I'm really doing in my personal life? I just wake up, I go to work, and then I come back home and I do it all over again. It's just like a rat race. And that's kind of why a lot of people are like, let me start my own business. It's not as easy as it is to even do your own business. So it's just balancing whatever it is you're doing. It kind of helps you set, your priorities straight.
Yeah, with the remote work, especially the boundary between work and life is even more thinner than and ambiguous than before, right?
Yeah.
So what's next for Jaineel? And how can people get in touch with you if they want to get some advice on consulting or anything in general, whether that be clients or new students?
If anyone wants to get in touch with me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. Please find me. You'll obviously spell my name correctly in the title of the podcast. If there's someone that reaches out to you specifically, and is like, oh, I would love to have a conversation with Jaineel, please pass them over. I'd be happy to have a conversation with them. I think what's next for me is, so the path until now was very structured, because consulting, it's there's a handful of firms that do it, and there's buckets. There's the MBBs, the Big Fours, the mid tiers, the T2s, whichever it is. I always knew who I needed to reach out to get into here. Now that I've been here, it's well, now all of the networking I did was for this. There's no network I have, but there's a smaller network I have that's outside of consulting. So now it's figuring out and doing the thinking of what is next for me, because
we'll expand that, brother.
It's kind of an ambiguous time now. I did what I wanted to, which was get into consulting, I told myself that, and I wasn't leaving consulting. Not that I'm leaving consulting now, but I was definitely not leaving until I got promoted, which has now happened. So this is the right time for me to do some thinking and like figure out like what it is like I want to do. I think consulting's fun. My firm is great, which means that, you know, sometimes you might find that consulting is, or like any high pressure career, it's not sustainable, but I can see a long-term path in the firm that I'm in. So yeah, it's just seeing the priorities for the future. I'd say one thing that is important to me is that I want to, you know, look into opportunities like across the border in the States, be that like a permanent job or be that just like finding more projects even at my firm where I can go there, lend a hand and come back. So
Makes sense.
That's a really good plan you got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll
He
see.
hasn't figured it out. He hasn't figured it out. Well, thank you everyone for attending this episode. I hope you guys got a lot of value from our very good friend Jaineel. But this is the end of it. Episode 5. Make sure to share with your friends who are looking to get into consulting, and make sure to share the podcast Financially Turbulent with them and add some things that you want the audience to cover.
Yes, so if you have any questions, first of all, for Jaineel, we are going to be tagging him in the bio below. You can reach out to him on LinkedIn. Please keep it professional. If you do have any personal questions, sure, you can ask those, but at the end of the day, just keep it professional. And also, we are available on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. And please do share with friends and family. And thank you so much, Jaineel, for taking the
Thank
time.
you for having me, guys. This
I
was-
know he came all the way from Cambridge to do a podcast with us.
No, thank you for having me. This was great to catch up. I know it's been some time. I talked to Harman, but it's been some time since we caught up, so it's been fun. Thank you. I'm very honored to be the first guest that Financial Turbulent has had on. I'm sure I'll be the first of many and a growing list of increasing credibility, but I'm glad that I've set the baseline.
Yeah, you set the bar pretty high, man. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone.
Guys. Have a
Take
good
care,
one.
everyone.